She can't testify dressed like that. That's the first thing I heard. Before I even reached the witness stand. Not good morning. Not please take a seat. Just a judgment. Thrown like a stone, sharp and casual. And the worst part? They didn't even whisper it. It all started with a stare. Not the kind you get when you're late or lost, the kind that slices through fabric, culture and skin. I felt it the second I stepped past the metal detectors at the courthouse. Eyes narrowed. Conversations paused. A slow, scanning silence followed me down the hall. I'd been in courtrooms before. But never like this. Courtroom 6B smelled faintly of disinfectant and old wood. The air buzzed with a quiet tension, murmurs, shuffled papers, the occasional cough. Nothing unusual. Except me. The Niqab made everything louder. My steps. Their whispers. My own heartbeat. Excuse me. A voice stopped me cold before I even reached the front. A security officer. Late 30s. Buzz cut. Frowning. Ma'am, are you here to testify? I nodded. His eyes darted to my face, or what little he could see of it. You can't do that dressed like this. Is there a written policy? I asked softly. He didn't answer. Just motioned me forward. When I entered the courtroom, it was like someone turned the lights up and the volume down. Every head turned. Even the stenographer froze, fingers hovering above the keys. Is that allowed? Someone whispered from the gallery. This is America. Another muttered, not kindly. I mean, how do we know who she even is? I kept walking. The judge glanced up, saw me and leaned forward. His brows pulled together slowly, like he couldn't quite process what he was seeing. I took a seat near the witness box. That's when I heard it, low, mocking. Did she get lost on her way to a costume party? A few people laughed. Not loudly, just enough. Enough to sting. Enough to remind me that here, I wasn't just a professional. I was a statement. An inconvenience. A challenge to their comfort. And the hearing hadn't even started yet. The judge cleared his throat. Ma'am, he said, dragging the word out like it had thorns. Before we proceed, I'm going to need you to remove your face covering. We require full visibility of witnesses in this courtroom. His tone was firm but not formal, like a teacher tired of repeating instructions. The kind of voice used to control, not to understand. I didn't move. I'm sorry. I asked evenly. He leaned back in his chair, lips tightening. You'll need to take that off. We can't allow testimony from someone whose face we can't see. It compromises the integrity of the proceedings. Murmurs rose behind me. A shuffle of fabric. Someone snorted. But Your Honor, the public defender began. The judge raised a hand to silence him. This isn't up for debate. Then came the comment I'll never forget. If she won't even show her face, what is she hiding? Said with a laugh. Said like I wasn't even there. Said like I wasn't a person, just a problem in cloth. Heat burned behind my eyes, but I blinked it back. I adjusted the folder on my lap, as if that might ground me. As if posture could protect me from what came next. The attorney at the opposing table smirked. No offense, he said, which of course meant offense was coming. But how can we expect a jury to trust a witness in a mask? It's not Halloween. Laughter again. Small. Controlled. Still enough. I looked at him. Not with anger. Just stillness. No one objected. Not even the clerk. I wasn't here for a fight, not yet. But I felt it rising. Coiling in the pit of my stomach like something ancient. I folded my hands. I breathed slowly. I reminded myself of my role. My mission. My silence. Because sometimes silence isn't surrender. It's strategy. You ever feel the weight of a room turn against you? Not with violence but with silence? That's what it felt like. Not one person looked at me like I belonged there. Not the bailiff. Not the court reporter. Not even the woman on the jury bench, adjusting her glasses just to glare longer. And the judge? He was still waiting. Eyes fixed on me, tapping his pen like a countdown. Last chance, he said. Remove it, or you'll be held in contempt. Contempt. That word rang louder than the gavel ever could. In that moment I knew what they thought of me. They didn't see a woman. They didn't see education or dignity or purpose. They saw an intruder in their space. Someone who didn't match the picture they'd drawn in their heads. And then just as I opened my mouth to respond, the door creaked. Someone had entered. Every head turned. A man in a gray suit walked in, slow, deliberate. He didn't sit. Didn't speak. Just stood at the back of the room, arms crossed, watching. The judge noticed him. His face flickered recognition, unease, but he didn't say anything. Not yet. I watched the judge shift in his seat. He cleared his throat again. Either she complies, or we proceed without her testimony. Those are the options. The room was holding its breath. So was I. And then I did something that no one expected. I stood up. Not fast. Not aggressive. Just steady. And for the first time I spoke not softly, not passively, but clear enough for every single person to hear. Is it the truth you want? Or just a face you're comfortable with? The courtroom went still. But the man in the back? He uncrossed his arms. You could hear the hum of the ceiling lights after I spoke. No one expected me to challenge the room. Not like that. Not calmly. Not directly. Not with that question. The judge blinked. His pen froze mid-tap. Miss, he began, fumbling slightly. This is a legal matter, not a political statement. Exactly, I said. So let's stick to the law. He leaned forward. The law gives me discretion over this courtroom. And I'm using it. His voice was louder now. Defensive. The public defender tried again. Your Honor, respectfully, if there is no statutory requirement. I don't need a statute, the judge snapped. I need credibility. And there it was. The mask wasn't the issue. My presence was. The courtroom had turned cold, not physically, but in spirit. People weren't just staring anymore. They were waiting. Waiting for me to fold. Waiting for me to obey, or explode, or walk out humiliated. I didn't do any of those things. I stayed standing. The man in the back, the one in the gray suit, still hadn't moved. Still watching. Still silent. But now the court clerk noticed him. Whispered something to the bailiff. The judge glanced that way too. His jaw tightened. I saw it, a flicker of uncertainty. Someone in that room had more power than him. And he knew it. But instead of backing off, he doubled down. You may take a seat, he told me. This court will proceed without your testimony. The smirk returned to the opposing attorney's face. He turned to his client and whispered something behind his hand. They were celebrating already. I slowly sat down. And then right then, the man in the gray suit took a step forward. One step. And the temperature in the room dropped. One step. That's all it took. Every head turned again. The man in the gray suit didn't speak. He didn't have to. Something about him quieted the room in a way even the judge couldn't manage. Authority wasn't something he announced. It followed him. The bailiff hesitated mid-breath. Even the defense attorney, so smug just seconds ago, shifted in his chair. The judge noticed too. Can I help you, sir? He asked, trying to keep his tone level. The man didn't answer. He just pulled out a small notepad and began writing. Calmly. Intentionally. The judge cleared his throat. If you're here for another case, I'll have to ask you to wait outside until. The man looked up. Just once. No words. Just a long, assessing glance in the judge's direction. And then he returned to his notes. The room was still again. Uncomfortably so. I sat there, hands folded in my lap, trying not to tremble. Not from fear. From control. Because that's what moments like this take, control. The kind you have to learn when people think you don't deserve to speak. Or be seen. Or exist on your own terms. The judge shifted again in his seat. Let's proceed with the next witness, he muttered, avoiding eye contact now. The prosecutor stood up, flustered. Pages shuffled. She wasn't ready. No one was. They called the next name, but all eyes were still on me. Or rather on him. The man in the back. He didn't move again. Just stood there, watching. Like he was collecting something no one else could see. Not evidence. Not testimony. Truth. The kind that doesn't need a mic. Or a robe. Or a gavel. And something told me he wasn't finished. You ever feel a room start to shift before anyone says a word? That's what happened next. Not loud. Not obvious. But real. The energy in courtroom 6B changed, the kind of change you only notice when people start acting too normal. When voices get quieter. When eyes stop meeting yours. When the ones laughing minutes ago suddenly go still. That man in the gray suit hadn't moved again. He just stood there, writing. Like everything in that room was being documented, not just on paper, but on record. And the judge felt it. His voice, louder before, was tighter now. He stumbled over names. Mispronounced one. Fumbled a citation. Something was cracking. But he didn't stop. He couldn't. Not without losing face. Let's move on, he said, waving to the next witness. This court doesn't have time for delays or distractions. Distractions. That's what I was now. A distraction. But still, I said nothing. I didn't flinch. I watched. Listened. Waited. Then the prosecutor called a name. And no one answered. Again. Mr. Donovan? She repeated. Silence. The man wasn't there. The courtroom paused. The judge frowned, annoyed. He was just outside. That's when the bailiff stepped forward and whispered something into his ear. Whatever it was, it turned the judge's face pale. He nodded stiffly. We'll recess for 10 minutes. Recess? So suddenly? The audience stirred. Some stood, unsure if they should. Others sat frozen, curious. But the man in the gray suit? He was already walking straight toward the judge's bench. No hesitation. No permission. Just presence. The judge stood up fast. Too fast. And for a split second I saw it. Not control. Not authority. Panic. The man in the gray suit didn't wait for an invitation. He walked past the first row, then the second, right up to the bench. The judge straightened like he was about to be scolded by someone who actually mattered, which, judging by the look on his face, he was. There were no mics on, but we all felt the tension. The gray suit man leaned in and said something we couldn't hear, just a few quiet words. The judge nodded. His hand trembled as he reached for his glass of water. Then the man handed over a thin envelope. Plain. White. Sealed. The judge stared at it like it was radioactive. When the man turned and walked back to the gallery, you could have heard a paperclip drop. He didn't sit down. He just folded his arms again and looked at me. Not pitifully. Not protectively. Just knowingly. Like he'd been waiting for something to happen, and now it had. The judge didn't speak for a full 30 seconds. Then, clearing his throat, he adjusted his robe, lifted the envelope, and announced, "This court will recess for an early lunch. All proceedings are temporarily suspended." Gasps. Not from everyone, but enough to ripple across the room. The prosecutor stood frozen, lips parted mid-thought. The opposing attorney lowered his pen slowly. No one moved. No one understood. But something had changed. The judge stood up, not proud but humbled, almost afraid. And then, without looking at me again, he stepped out through the side door. Gone. Just like that. But I stayed seated, because I knew what was next. It was time for my name to be called. Not as a witness. Not as a defendant. Not as a distraction. But as something none of them had seen coming. The room emptied slowly, uneasily. The audience didn't know whether to stand, whisper, or just keep pretending this was business as usual. The man in the gray suit was still standing, still watching, still silent. And me? I finally stood up. Not in defiance. Not in anger. Just ready. I reached into my coat pocket, the same one I'd kept my notes in, the same one no one thought to check, and pulled out a black leather badge case. The kind you don't flash unless you mean it. I opened it, and everything stopped. The court clerk gasped. A paper slipped from the public defender's hands. The opposing attorney's jaw visibly dropped, because in gold federal print beneath the seal of the Department of Justice were 5 simple words. Senior Oversight Judge, Dr. Layla Rahman. I turned to the gallery, to the people who had whispered, laughed, doubted, stared. "I wasn't here to testify," I said, voice steady but sharp. "I was here to evaluate." A hush dropped like glass hitting concrete. I was assigned under federal order to observe this court's treatment of religious and ethnic minorities during trial. Eyes widened. One woman near the back muttered, "Oh my God." And then I turned toward the door the judge had disappeared behind. No need to call him back. His record speaks loud enough. No one moved. No one laughed. Even the smirking attorney had gone ghost white. Because suddenly, I wasn't the woman in the niqab. I was the highest authority in the room. No one told them to sit down. But they did. Slowly. As if gravity itself had changed. The smirking lawyer was now hunched over his notes, pretending to read what he hadn't even written. The court clerk, the one who hadn't looked me in the eyes earlier, stared at her desk like it might swallow her whole. The bailiff? Suddenly very interested in the fire extinguisher by the wall. I walked forward, past the same benches that had whispered, past the defense table that laughed. No one met my eyes. Not anymore. And I didn't need them to, because that was the point. Prejudice doesn't always come with slurs or fists. Sometimes it wears a suit. Sometimes it calls itself procedure. Sometimes it waits for you to shrink so it can feel tall. But today, it didn't win. The man in the gray suit gave a small nod. Just once. Then he turned and walked out. His job was done. Mine wasn't. I turned back to the room. "My report will be filed today," I said. "Recommendations for disciplinary action are already under review." No applause. Just silence. The kind that hurts more than noise. And as I walked toward the exit, I passed the woman who'd called my niqab a costume. She flinched. Not because I glared, but because I didn't. Because I'd already moved beyond her, and she knew it. By the time I reached the door, no one saw a threat. No one saw a witness. They saw the truth walking out in silence. And some truths echo long after the gavel drops. I stepped out into the hallway, letting the heavy courtroom door close behind me with a soft, final thud. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just final. The marble floor beneath my heels felt different now, not cold, not hostile. Just solid. Like it was finally mine to walk on without apology. I didn't need to turn around. I didn't need to see their faces. The silence back there told me enough. And maybe the world wouldn't change because of one hearing. But that courtroom? It would never forget today. Because sometimes justice doesn't shout. It walks in quietly, listens carefully, and leaves behind a silence you can't ignore. "Now it's your turn. Have you ever been judged before anyone knew your name? Ever been underestimated because of how you looked, dressed, or prayed? Share your story in the comments, or just drop it if this hit you. Justice isn't about who speaks the loudest. It's about who keeps standing when everyone else expects them to break. Follow for more real stories that flip the script. You never know who's watching or who's already writing the report.